Hey everyone, welcome to Reddistry. If you love wild Reddit stories like crazy cheating tales, spooky scary stories to fall asleep to, or just need something to relax with, you're in the right place. We've got a new Reddit stories compilation for you every week, so make sure to like, comment, and hit that subscribe button. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Let's get into it. First story. Everything is disappearing. It began subtly, so subtly that most people didn't notice. A missed meeting here, an unanswered text there. At first, no one connected the dots. People vanish all the time, runaways, accidents, those who simply want to disappear. But this wasn't like that. Entire families stopped answering their phones. Offices sat empty despite calendars packed with back-to-back meetings. A friend would go to check on their neighbor and find an unlocked door, steaming coffee on the counter, and a house utterly empty. It wasn't just absence. It was as if these people had been erased entirely. No signs of struggle, no trace of where they had gone. The media didn't catch on at first. There were a few murmurs, a handful of strange disappearance segments buried under the usual headlines. It wasn't until the disappearances reached critical mass that they could no longer be ignored. By then, the world was already unraveling. The news exploded, with theories each more wild than the last. Mass vanishings across continents. Global panic as millions disappear overnight. Speculation ran rampant. Some claimed it was divine judgment, others a cosmic event, a rupture in reality itself. Theories poured in faster than anyone could debunk them. Aliens, government experiments, some new and undetectable weapon. The possibilities were endless, and none of them brought answers. At first, I clung to the hope that it wouldn't touch me. The disappearances were somewhere else, happening to strangers. But denial is a fragile thing, and mine shattered when I went to visit my sister. Her front door was unlocked. Inside, the TV still played a muted rerun of some sitcom. A mug of coffee sat on the counter, its contents cold and congealing. Her shoes were by the door. Her keys hung on the hook. Everything was perfectly in place. Everything but her. I called her name until my throat was raw. I scoured the house, throwing open closets, yanking back curtains. I even checked the attic as if she might have hidden herself away. But the house was silent save for the distant laugh track of the forgotten TV. I stayed in her house until nightfall, waiting for her to come back, refusing to accept what I already knew. When the sun set and the world outside grew dark, the silence became unbearable. I turned the TV off and sat in the dim kitchen, listening to the hum of the fridge and the soft ticking of the wall clock. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't leave. By the time I finally returned to my own apartment, the world felt different. The city streets were quieter than they should have been, a stillness that set my nerves on edge. I couldn't shake the feeling that something vast and incomprehensible had shifted, and there was no going back. The disappearances didn't slow. They accelerated. Every day, more people vanished. The streets grew quieter, their usual clamor replaced by an eerie stillness. Public spaces emptied. Schools closed their hallways, echoing with memories of life that no longer existed. Grocery stores became desolate. Shelves sat bare, abandoned by workers who never came back. It wasn't just people. The infrastructure began to fail within weeks. Power outages became commonplace. Water systems faltered. Radios crackled with static, punctuated by panicked broadcasts from stations running on backup generators. The hum of daily life, the rhythm we all took for granted, had been shattered. I wandered the city aimlessly, searching for something I couldn't name. The roads were cluttered with abandoned cars. Homes stood with their doors wide open, curtains fluttering in the wind. I passed a playground one afternoon, the swings swaying gently as if children had just let off moments ago. But there were no children. No laughter, only the wind. The air itself felt different, thicker, heavier, as though it carried the weight of unseen eyes. The skies grew dimmer. Clouds seemed to hover unnaturally low, their shapes distorted and alien. Even the light from the sun took on an uncanny quality, muted and lifeless. Buildings began to show signs of decay. Cracks spiderwebbed across concrete walls, glass shattered without warning, scattering glittering shards onto deserted sidewalks. The city was crumbling, but it wasn't natural. It was too fast, too chaotic. Entire structures collapsed, as if the ground beneath them had simply given up. One evening, as I walked through what used to be a bustling market square, I noticed something strange. The edges of the world seemed to blur. Streets I had walked my entire life now seemed unfamiliar, their lines fading into a gray haze. It felt as though the city itself was being erased piece by piece. I tried to cling to the memory of what the world had been, but even my own thoughts felt slippery, insubstantial. At night, I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the cracks creeping along the ceiling. I listened to the distant hum, low and steady like a heartbeat resonating through the earth. It wasn't just the disappearances anymore. It wasn't just the decay. Something larger was happening. Something we couldn't see, couldn't name. The stars were the first to go. At first they flickered faintly like candles struggling to stay lit. Then one by one they winked out entirely. The sky at night became a void, black and endless, as if the universe itself were closing its eyes. The earth followed. Sinkholes yawned open without warning, swallowing entire neighborhoods in an instant. Rivers changed course unpredictably, flooding cities one day and drying up the next. The ocean seemed to pulse unnaturally, tides surging far beyond their normal reach, leaving vast stretches of coastline barren before reclaiming them in a violent rush. The hum grew louder. It wasn't just a sound, it was a presence, a vibration that resonated through everything from the bones in my body to the air I breathed. It was constant now, a low and mournful drone that seemed to rise from the ground itself. I began seeing things, or thought I did. Fleeting shapes at the edges of my vision, dark and indistinct. Sometimes I caught glimpses of them in reflections hovering just behind me. Other times, I felt their presence in the room, heavy and oppressive, though I saw nothing when I turned to look. The few people I passed on the streets had the same haunted look in their eyes. They saw the shapes too. By then, the disappearances had become a blessing. It was better to vanish than to stay and watch the world collapse. The world was empty now, or nearly so. I could feel it in the air and the ground beneath my feet. The end was coming, but I didn't know what that meant. The city had all but dissolved. Streets that had once been crowded with life now ended abruptly, fraying into voids of shifting static. Buildings twisted and folded into impossible shapes before fading entirely. The air shimmered with a heatless mirage, the horizon a smudge of gray nothingness. The hum was everywhere, louder than ever. It seemed to emanate from the cracks in the earth, from the empty skies, from inside my very bones. It wasn't just a sound, it was a force, an inevitability. I found myself at the edge of the city one day, where the highway stretched into what used to be the countryside. Except there was no countryside. The road ended in a sheer drop into nothingness. I stood there for hours, staring into the void, trying to understand. Behind me, the city continued to unravel. Whole blocks disappeared in silence, leaving behind only barren expanses of gray dirt. The sky fractured, splintering into shards of light that bled together and faded. And then there was silence. I don't know if I vanished or if the world did. Perhaps it doesn't matter. All that remains is the hum resonating endlessly in the dark. Second story. The unhinged. She stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, having sensed something truly unfamiliar. Amidst the bustle of the crowded city, her head suddenly fell on its side, sloping around the crest of her left shoulder as if she had suddenly lost her cervical spine. Yet she felt no pain, and her mind was perfectly sound until a strong pang of panic swept her entire body. She stood paralyzed as fear started seeping into all crevices of her mind. It was a new kind of fear, one that told her that something was unnatural, yet very real. She scrambled to understand the logic of what had just happened, not even knowing the extent of her condition. No answers came to mind, only the unsettling realization that her circumstance was unprecedented. This is when anxiety took over with full force. While in complete horror, she tried to refrain from moving too much in fear of disturbing her already disturbed contortion. Standing there in shock, the atmosphere of the city started creeping back in. She noticed the bewildered looks from passers-by, and almost immediately, another wave of fear started crashing towards her. Among the masses, she never felt more alone as people gasped and shrieked in their own dread and disbelief at what they were witnessing. It was beyond comprehension. Without any explanation or warning, there stood a lady with her head completely unhinged, dangling by its side from only the skin of her neck. Then, as if she was the first in a line of dominoes, others started feeling their own heads flop. The entire street had quickly become littered with people standing with their heads hanging abnormally on their sides. For a brief moment, there was only silence as the public stood astonished at what had just transpired. And just like the first, the onset of each own's predicament sent a tsunami of terror, unlike anything the world has seen. Total chaos amongst the unhinged.